Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chai Talk with Wajahat Ali for the Left Hook Substack, where I invite a subject matter expert who is far smarter than me to break down one big question in usually 30 minutes or less. And today I have my friend Rula Jebreal. Rula Jebreal is setting the record. She is the first Left Hook guest who has appeared three times. I will get her a jacket when she joins the Five Timer Club, and one day, inshallah, she will join me and we'll talk about, I don't know, cats and pistachio gelato and some good news. But Rula is an award-winning author and a journalist and a scholar and expert on Israel and Palestine. And she has released a new book. It's first coming out in Italy, in the Italian version, Genocidio, but it will be coming out in the English version, Genocide, which will be coming out when, Rula?
Hopefully in a couple of months, 3, 4 months.
In 3, 4 months, it's the title in English is Genocide: What's Left of Us, and I want to give you
Remains of
all
us, yes.
a fantastic blurb that was given by Zateo contributor and author Naomi Klein. This is what she wrote about genocide, Rula's new book. Quote, as humanity tumbles into the moral abyss of a world governed solely by violence, brute force, and impunity, Rula Jebreal's extraordinary book arrives as a lifeline, reminding us that there is another option. We can demand the enforcement of hard-won human rights agreements and treaties rooted in the sanctity of life. With strength and determination, we must extend our arms toward Jebreal's transcendent vision, our last best hope. Read, share, and act upon this book. End quote, my Naomi Klein. The book again is Genocide, which will be released in a few months in English. And today is the publication in Italy, Genocidia. Congratulations, Rula. I wish it was for a better topic. I wish it was for a better time, but this is the time we live in now. And the big question I have, just really going off of Naomi's extraordinary blurb, is how can the world stop Israel's genocide of Palestinians? That's the big question we're going to tackle today. And before we do, some table setting for people who haven't kept up with what's been happening for the past year and a half, folks. This week, Prime Minister of Israel Benjamin Netanyahu declared that Israel was, quote, on the eve of a forceful entry of Gaza. Specifically, Israel's Security Cabinet, no subtlety, no dog whistles, approved of a plan for thousands, tens of thousands of Israeli soldiers to seize and hold Gaza permanently and relocate Palestinians to the south, whatever that means. Specifically, Netanyahu said it's time to, quote, launch the concluding moves. This is on the heels of what the world is now reporting is a human rights catastrophe in Gaza, where Israel, for the past few months, has caused preventable catastrophe with humanitarian aid being barred. There's shortages of food, water, and medicine. Palestinians are literally starving, and the New York Times did a big piece on this earlier this week. That's what's happening right now. And while this is happening, Houthis have said, you have to stop attacking Gaza. They attacked the airport in Tel Aviv. Israel responded, attacking Sana's airport. Donald Trump, as of today, just 2 hours ago, claims credit for Houthis allegedly calling Donald Trump up and saying we're going to stop the war, allegedly. So this is what's happening. It's a spiraling, escalating, preventable catastrophe, a genocide. It's drawing in Lebanon, Yemen, Iran, and by the way, also, folks, there are still Israeli hostages, and the family members of the hostages are increasingly and vocally protesting against Netanyahu, saying that Netanyahu and the Netanyahu government does not care about the hostages. They just want more power and more land. Where was I wrong in that assessment, Rula?
I wish you were wrong somewhere, but you are wrong nowhere. The situation is catastrophic, not only for Palestinians in Gaza. Now we're watching, the world, Palestinians around the world have been telling the world, and nobody listened when we told everybody already in October 2023 that the ultimate goal of the Israeli government was a second Nakba. Now the ministers in the Israeli government saying, yeah, we're going to occupy Gaza. We're going to seize the land. The settlers are waiting outside the border of Gaza saying, when can we settle? When we can start building? And Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and Netanyahu, and Donald Trump believe in the ethnic cleansing, total purge of Palestinians. They want Palestinian lands without Palestinians. Smotrich today, the finance minister of Israel, said basically that, and I want to quote him directly, Gaza will be destroyed. Its residents will be concentrated basically from the north to the south. And then he said, in preparation for expulsion of Palestinians, for evacuation to other Arab country and other country, and we face a new Nakba. And this is the real response, the accurate response to October 7 attack. So basically, he's telling us that the response to October 7 atrocity will be a massive extermination of Palestinians and ethnic cleansing, basically a genocide with a goal of ethnic cleansing. I mean, and the worst part of all of this, Waj, is to see the West, to see Western democracies, in Europe especially, the countries continue to finance Israel, to arm Israel, and to basically endorse Israel regardless the crimes that are being committed, that are live streamed to all our homes. We lived for 18 months, 19 months, watching a live stream of a genocide. And we watched these European leaders basically sending their foreign minister, as she went last week, and she said to Bibi Netanyahu, we are your partners. Basically destroying even the last charade that they care about international law. So when you ask me what can we do, what we can do, the only way to beat or to stop Trumpism and Netanyahu and Kahanism is to protect and defend international law, regardless the identity of the criminals, the people who are committing the crimes, and the identity of the victims. We need to enshrine international law, the sanctity of life, but also we need to understand that anybody that thinks that by purging and exterminating Palestinians, they will be safer. Trump and Netanyahu and Putin and Ben-Gvir are unleashing a new barbaric doctrine, and which will come back to haunt all of us. Listen to the rhetoric that is being used now by the Sudanese who are exterminating other Sudanese. They're using the same talking points used by the Israelis to justify the genocide. Human shields, collateral damage, self-defense. By the way, the Indians who are preparing now maybe to attack the Pakistanis or Bangladesh, they're actually talking clearly about using Gaza's doctrine. Gaza is becoming a doctrine that will be imported and exported everywhere. And if Democrats around the world, progressives and liberals, who just were voted in Australia and Canada, don't understand that the only way to defeat Trump is through legality, through justice, and through affirming the principle that Netanyahu and his government need to be prosecuted, need to be brought before the International Criminal Court, and the Genocide Convention needs to be implemented, because the orders by the International Court of Justice was not only for Israel to stop their crimes, was an order for the international community, especially the global north or Western countries, to use any leverage, economic sanctions, arms embargo, diplomatic sanctions to stop Israel, to stop the mass slaughter and mass starvation. I cannot watch again children who are starving to death. I want to repeat a sentence that basically the most important expert in Israel said recently, and he wrote it in Haaretz, and that's Daniel Blattman. And he's an expert of the Holocaust, of genocides. He wrote he cannot believe that in his lifetime, in his worst nightmare, is to see the Israeli government using starvation and killing children by using starvation, and doing this in the name of basically self-defense. He said what's happening in Gaza is not the Holocaust, but it's the same family. It's exactly the same family. We need to listen to these experts, because nobody can pretend in the future that they didn't know. We all knew. But the real question, why did not you do anything? Europeans are paralyzed and they feel like, oh, because they committed the genocide against the Jews, that somehow now they can ignore the genocide done basically Israel. And I think this is creating such a catastrophe, because fascism is the main beneficiary of the genocide of the Palestinians.
You said a lot there, and we're going to unpack it. But yes, of course, one day we will have all been against this. But while it was happening, we were
Omar,
quiet. Yeah, Omar, who I interviewed, he has a great book out there, and is a great essay where it was based off a tweet, specifically as he saw the genocide of Palestinians. Oh yes, one day we will have all been against this, and one day we will have said, ah yes, I would have marched with Martin Luther King, and I would have protested the war in Iraq. But this is happening, folks, in real time with our money, U.S. weapons, U.S. diplomatic support. You're seeing literally the ethnic cleansing when you forcibly remove a native population through violence and push them away. That is ethnic cleansing, which is genocidal. And I want to, before going into what international communities and allies can do to step up, I really want to talk about the language because you quoted Smotrich, who's a financial minister, extremist, openly genocidal against Palestinians, and he said this is openly. He used the word Nakba, and you used the word Nakba. Can you define what Nakba is for people who hear it, but from a Palestinian perspective, and why what Palestinians in Gaza in particular are witnessing right now is the new Nakba for them?
a second Nakba. So the Nakba happened in 1948, and it is described by Palestinians as a catastrophe. It's a it's a massacre of thousands of people, destruction of 500 Palestinian villages, and the mass expulsion with force and violence and terror of 750,000 Palestinians from our homeland, from all
1948.
in 1948. And by the way, the Israelis' narrative or the propaganda is like, oh, 1948, the Arabs attack us. By the time the other Arab countries attacked, Israel already kicked out of Palestine, expelled 300,000 Palestinians, expelled them with force, with barbarity. By doing what? Doing massacres like the massacre of Deir Yassin. Deir Yassin massacre is a small village where these militias, the Israeli militia, the Irgun and the Haganah, would bomb at night people in their homes. Now we're watching something very similar, bombing people as they sleep in their tent, in the hospitals, in the schools, in the universities, decimating their villages. And that trauma is still alive. I was raised, Wajahat, in an orphanage in East Jerusalem. My teachers were the survivor of the first Nakba. They always told us, if it happened once, it can happen again. I thought their trauma spoke for them. I was wrong. I never thought in my lifetime I would be watching a second Nakba. And it's worse than a Nakba because this is a mass extermination that now is entering its final stages. We saw live stream of butchery, of barbarity, of massacre of children. Children are beheaded or children are shot in the head. Children in Gaza are telling us they want to die because they cannot bear the atrocity they've been subjected to and they've been witnessing. We watched our humanity crumble. We watched the world going from never again to never mind. We watched people justify the mass killing, the mass starvation, because somehow everybody was guilty of the crimes committed by Hamas. And when you criminalize an entire nation, and that process did not start, by the way, on October 7. When Secretary of the United Nations Guterres said that Gaza is an extermination camp, he is right. But when he in October 2023 said this did not start now, he was right. 2023 was the deadliest year for Palestinians. Way before October 7th, Israel already killed 244 Palestinians, of which 44 children. They already committed 2 pogroms in 2 villages, Hawara and Benaiya. And you have ministers in the government, sitting ministers saying, we want more of this. We endorse these pogroms. I had a minister, I remember I was an Israeli in Israel visiting my family, when a minister looked at a representative who happened to be an Israeli Palestinian citizen and said, "We did not finish the job in
Mm.
1948. Your presence here is a mistake." That kind of genocidal rhetoric didn't start with October 7. It's been going on for a long time, which paved the way for what we are seeing. What we are seeing now is a culmination of three things: the failure of the international community to make Israel respect international law, international United Nations resolution, and the complicity of the West, not only the United States, Germany, England, Italy, they're still arming and financing Israel. The second thing that collapsed is the left or the progressive part of the Israelis. They decided that they can cope and live with the occupation, that the cost of the occupation is, yeah, we put a wall, we don't have to see the Palestinians, and we can bomb them every time and basically oppress them and deny them basic right, and we can contain them, that somehow there will not be a blowback. The third element that I think is the most dangerous one, we saw something that I honestly, we saw the world, the global South telling the global North, look, you used international law against us. Now you're telling us that the international courts are for thugs like Putin and for Africa. That means international law is null and void,
Yeah.
and it is basically irrelevant. So
Might
it's
makes right. Whoever has power, do what you want.
thank you. And we're watching also a race to armaments. Europeans, instead of acting by taking Netanyahu to the court, they're saying, oh, we will spend $800 billion to arm ourselves. So basically, this is the best gift for Netanyahu and Trumpism and Kahanism, because fascists win when you tell them that there's no alternative except armaments and more wars. You're validating and legitimizing their worldview. And I think we're heading towards a world where probably Gaza will be an example that will be exported, but will be our future. And I think that sentence was used by Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia. He is spot on. Gaza is a litmus test to humanity. It's a watershed moment. If you abolish justice and international law, you will end up by basically Gazification, not only of the West Bank, but the world.
And you know what you just said was echoed by a guest I had on about 2 weeks ago when we were talking about what the Hindu fascist regime is doing to Kashmir, where Kashmir has oftentimes been a laboratory for what happens when fascists get in power. And it just doesn't stop with Kashmir, right? They go after journalists, they go after dissidents, they go after students, and they go after anyone abroad, right? When they deal with other fascist countries, right? Oh, you're criticizing India? Hey, Trump, quid pro quo. Why don't you crack down on that legal immigrant or that citizen? And in response, we'll give you some money. And you're seeing that happening with pro-Palestinian
Yeah.
activist Meza Osterk, who just wrote a op-ed, 30-year-old grad student got kidnapped, and right now she's being detained, and her lawyers are saying, she's suffering right now. This woman was literally kidnapped, folks, from the streets of Boston by masked ICE members for co-writing an op-ed criticizing Israel and asking the United States and other institutions to engage in BDS or some form of boycotting of Israel to stop the genocide. You see Mahmoud Khalil, no criminal charges, detained, missed the birth of his child, right? Columbia student. You're seeing legal immigrants here now in plane loads being sent to El Salvador. You're seeing crackdown on citizens. So you're seeing why in real time enabling fascists abroad, aligning yourselves with fascists, being silent while fascism thrives, eventually, Rula, it comes after all of us. And this is where I want to ask you, before we talk about what international countries should do, why should they pivot, right? Because in a strange way, I hate framing it this way, but human beings are selfish. Why should Americans care, right? Because if you're looking at it right now, if you look at the Gallup poll that came out last month,
Yeah.
for the first time, Rula, in our life, a majority of Americans are critical of Israel. And there's a
Yes.
split in the Republican Party, which is fascinating to watch. I'm talking about MAGA. Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, very anti-Semitic, but at the same time, they're like, why should I support this? And Candace Owens is like, I can't support killing of babies. So this is no longer even if you will, a positive slam dunk position for both parties in America or liberals and conservatives in Europe. Talk to us about why, these political movements and these parties should read the room right now and why it is not in their interest to support Netanyahu in Israel.
Look, I want to quote Jason Stanley, who's a Yale University professor, an expert on fascism, where he said that Netanyahu and Trump are basically using Zionism and anti-Semitism, or the charge of anti-Semitism, to destroy democracy.
Yeah.
Netanyahu is using Judaism, and Trump is using the fake charge of anti-Semitism. I don't believe a lot of Israel. I don't think Israeli critics in this moment are anti-Semitic. A lot of them, I think, are driven by the, and a lot of them are Jews, by the way.
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of them are Jews. All the experts I interviewed for my book Genocide are American Jews and Israeli Jews, and all of them agreed. The first person that talked about genocide was Ras Segal,
Yeah.
Omar Bartov, Arya Nir, Amos Goldberg, Israeli Jew. Many of them served in the army. Daniel Blattman, Omar Shaz, all of them are not anti-Semitic. They are Jewish people who believe that we need to condemn what's happening in the name of Judaism. Naomi Klein herself, who we talked about, Peter Beinart, all of these people care about Judaism. I think that Netanyahu is betraying the hostages, betraying Israel and the promise of what Israel was supposed to be, a multi-ethnic democracy, or a democracy at least. And this is basically, I think what you're seeing, especially on the right, and I admire Tucker Carlson and Rogan. And many of those guys, the MAGA people, it's like, not only we don't want to spend another war, we are horrified that our weapons are mass killing children. The fact that they actually talk about with empathy about dead children. I mean, and I see these psychopaths on the left,
Yeah, yeah, you see
basically
Rogan,
justifying.
Theo Vaughn. I
I
do not
mean,
admire Tucker Carlson. I know what you're saying because he has horrific views on everything else. But on this
look,
issue,
I must
Rogan, Theo
say,
Vaughn, and all these other people at least are more vocal in their criticism and their empathy with Palestinians than what you have seen with Biden, for example.
not even with Palestinians, with human beings. They don't. I mean, they don't. Honestly, I am sure they would say the same if Israel was of America was arming the Sudanese against the Sudanese themselves. I am confident they would say the same thing. I don't think it's one of the main reasons why, and I think this weaponization of anti-Semitism will hurt a lot of Jews in the
Of
end.
course, of course.
I mean, the whole idea that Israel was the safe haven for Jews is no longer. That was destroyed. And that was destroyed by Netanyahu and his far right government, who are now being condemned by the families of the hostages because they betrayed the hostages and abandoned them. They are basically sacrificing the hostages to just conquer land. Conquer land. Think of that. I mean, one of the things, when I grew up in Israel, Israel would make deals with anybody to bring back the hostages, including the dead hostages, including the bodies and the bones of dead people, so they can be buried with dignity in Israel. No more. Just one of the pillars of the whole idea of Israel collapsed with this government. But not only that, Netanyahu is comfortable with real anti-Semites, people who make the Nazi salutes.
No,
Elon
literally, you're
Musk,
right.
Elon Musk, Victor Orban, real anti-Semites. I really don't believe that the people critical of Israel in the MAGA party are anti-Semites. I don't believe that. I don't remember hearing them saying anything against Judaism. And I think we should stop conflating Judaism with Zionism, because that is what they are using to abduct people from the street, throw them in dungeons, and throw out the key. That's what they're doing to destroy higher education in the United States. I've been appearing on CNN very often, and you are given 2 minutes or 3 minutes, or with a bunch of people shouting at you, all kind of things, even when you try and despite the fact that there's no Palestinian voices in mainstream television, rarely you hear us. Americans, especially the younger generation, will never agree with what Israel is doing. Jewish, not Jewish, they believe it's the biggest evil ever in our lifetime, what Israel is doing by starving children to death, by shooting them on the head, by torturing medics and doctors and raping them to death, like they did with Dr. Adnan al-Bursh and many others. They are horrified. That ethno-nationalist fascist state it's not a state they want to live in, by the way. And that's why a lot of Israeli Jews, liberals, are leaving the country. There is a mass exodus
Hmm.
out of that country. And I think this is important to cite and to mention. Trump is transactional. He doesn't care about Palestinians. He doesn't care about Israelis. He doesn't care about Jews. What he cares about is power,
Hmm.
exactly like Netanyahu. But unlike Netanyahu, who came out here to the United States and gave Trump plans to bomb Iran, Trump doesn't want really to be entangled with another war. So he told them that he was negotiating directly with Iran. But the price to not have Netanyahu and his dogs screaming at Trump and doing to Trump what they did to Obama, the price will be Gaza. Not that, probably Trump told him indirectly, do whatever you want in Gaza, but let go of Iran. And that's
Hmm.
the secret deal behind the scenes where he will not open his mouth about about Gaza. Actually, Gaza will be the gift that he will receive when he will go to Israel next week. It will be like, oh, your Riviera is ready to be built. So
Quid pro quo.
send your oligarchs to build Gaza so we can have the settler crazy fanatics take over. I mean, I shudder to think what the security of the Jewish people and Israeli will be in the future, because everywhere they go, they're reminded what they did in Gaza. And I feel terrible because a lot of them maybe didn't even serve in the army. They have nothing to do with all of that. But everywhere they go, and I see videos on social media, restaurants, holidays, wherever they go, they're contested. And
Yeah.
I hope it's going to be only verbal contestation, because my biggest fear, and this is why we needed to defeat Hamas differently, politically, legally, with justice, and not with butchery, because you are actually strengthening that brand, because you're sending an idea to other radicals around the world that, if there's no law, if there's no justice, if there's no democracy, it's the law of the jungle. Let
Hmm.
us try to blow up things around the world. And I think the blowback will happen. It's a matter of when. It's
It's all,
and a
but
matter of
Rula, it's
where.
already happening, right? The blowback is in the last year and a half an increase in global Islamophobia, anti-Arab violence, and an
But I'm
anti-Semitism.
talking about terrorism
And
now,
no, I'm
right?
talking about terrorism.
Yes.
Also, and there's going to be violence and violent extremism
Yes.
because people say, "Well, rule of
Yes.
law doesn't matter," and you're
Yes.
bombing my family. Fine. Already a year ago, those experts on radicalization said Israel's biggest gift to extremist movements is the decimation of Gaza because these people have nothing to lose.
Agreed.
They'll be recruited, right? ISIS, Al Qaeda, right? This we've seen this again and again and again, and these are the experts saying that what Israel's doing by trying to their language redeem the land it's going to come at the cost of Israeli security, Jewish security, Palestinian security, and what you're saying we're witnessing in real time. In America, in democracies which are, weathering fascism, we're seeing the loss of our rights. We're seeing literally legal
The
residents,
destruction of democracy itself. The
civil
price
liberties,
of
people being jailed for writing, like
yes.
policing, right? And so, with all of this, and I'm glad you mentioned the youth because if you look at the demographics, young people across the board are radicalized in real time against Israel. It's like 70-30, 80-20 support for Palestinians against Israel. It's like something I never would have imagined in my life. And so I do want to ask about Democrats, right? Because
Yes.
we
Oh
try to be
God.
fair. We try to be fair. Where people do good, I give them props. Where people do bad, we have to lay the blame on the feet of not just MAGA and Donald Trump and the genocidal folks of both the Netanyahu regime and Trump's regime, but Joe Biden, Democratic establishment. I mean, let's be honest, Rula, this could not have happened without their complicity as well. And even now, with everything you've said, with majority of Democrats want a ceasefire, a majority of young people do not want to support Israel's genocide. A majority of progressive voters consider it a genocide. You still see this split in the Democratic Party where some Democrats are like, no, no, we can't. We have to stay quiet as they're going after immigrants and U.S. citizens and detaining people. No, no, let's destroy U.S. institutions and Columbia University. Let's just stay quiet. How do you wake up these establishment Democrats to say, read the room, stand up for what's right, stop a genocide?
Let me start by saying that I am disgusted by Joe Biden and horrified by what we are now discovering. We all knew behind the scene he was giving green light to Netanyahu, covering up for him politically and diplomatically, and giving him billions of dollars, $23 billion approved in armaments. Every weapon that dropped on people's heads in Gaza, that decimated, wiped out Gaza was an American weapon. The 2-ton bombs, but also the lying. To lie to the American people, say we are pushing for a ceasefire, when the government itself, now the Israeli government, admitting that he really never raised the issue, not even once.
Mm.
He was misleading, lying out of to basically get people to vote for Kamala while imposing on Kamala Harris, who was very weak to stand up to him, to say, and imposing on her and forcing her to say that she would do no different to Gaza. This is when Democrats lost the elections
I
because
think the
they
quote was, according to a book that came out, "No daylight, kid." Meaning
kids.
she couldn't move away from him. No daylight.
Yeah, yeah,
She had to
right.
uphold his legacy.
Because of his ego and the ego of his people, the people around him, and because he's an ideologue and he is committed to Zionism, an idea that I think he doesn't even understand what is it exactly, but it sounded good to him somehow. The whole propaganda about the desert bloom city, but all the garbage. But then if you don't understand what Zionism represent in this moment, just look at Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, look at the colonization, look at the pogroms in Palestinian villages, look at the mass killing of children. That is what represent in this moment in time and history. Biden might thought Zionism represents something else, a safe home for all the Jews. He actually created a threat that will hang over every Israeli for the rest of their lives, precisely because of Gaza. And I want to say that Democrats are not even examining their failure. Not only she didn't say anything about Gaza that is substantial, she didn't say that she will comply with international law or tie military aid, substantial military aid, to respect of international law. She basically allowed donors to dictate her agenda and Joe Biden to dictate her agenda. Why would anybody trust that? If genocide cannot be a red line, what is? If murdering and mass murdering of 18,000 children is not a red line, what is? If starving a population of 2 million people is not a red line, what is? Taxes for the rich? That is not an exciting argument you can win elections with. They don't care about, less taxes for the corporation that are bankrolling you. They care about saving basically people's lives and democracy. They care about the whole, the system of values that was built after World War II, were treaties and conventions, and where the whole idea never again is a real idea and doesn't turn to never mind
Yeah.
because it's applied against Palestinians. I mean, we need a reckoning, that even a worse reckoning inside the Democratic Party, for them to understand their catastrophic failure and how that failure opened the door for fascism in America. They are complicit with the destruction of American democracy. They actually handed the victory to Trump and to Netanyahu with their complicity, with the war crimes, with the genocide in Gaza. I am so angry because we tried, you and I and many other friends, to appeal to them, to make them understand that this is not only against your own interest, but will
Mm.
destroy you.
Yeah.
And you know what? Not only they ignored us, they thought we're idealists. They thought they can shove down the drain and shove down their throat of voters their disgusting policies. And not only they lost any credibility. Look at their popularity. Trump popularity at 36%, the Democratic Party popularity at 30%, Chuck Schumer at 6%. Good luck with that. And yet they continue to blame the uncommitted movement. They're not willing to examine their disgusting criminal conduct in Gaza.
And also, we have to keep receipts. The bar was really low. The bar was really low for a lot of Democratic voters. Even the uncommitted movement, the uncommitted movement was very principled. You might disagree with
Yes.
them, but they actually weren't, anarchists willing to burn down everything.
No.
They said, "We want to vote for you.
Yes.
Please, we want to vote for you." And at the end of the day, many of them said, yeah, between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, at the end of the day, they still went
Absolutely.
for Kamala Harris. But what they asked for was just have a ceasefire. Please, we're going to use
Stop the
whatever
mass
leverage we
killing.
can.
Stop
Yeah,
the killing of children.
stop the
Stop.
killing, stop sending arms. And what they asked for, the most bare minimum, Rula, and some
I
Democrats
know.
listening to this might not like this, but the bare minimum, let's be honest, that people asked for. This is how low the bar was. The bar was so low it was in hell. Just have a Palestinian American speaker at the DNC. And even then, Kamala Harris and the Democratic establishment said no. And voila.
I don't think she made the decision. I think they dictated the decisions. That's my impression from talking to people in her campaign, who I hope sooner or later will start speaking. She basically was, uh, they put her in front, as front runner, and they decided, we will give you the script. You read the script. You don't question the things, and you should thank us for putting you in pole position. I mean, I blame Biden. He should have dropped out 2 years ago and
I agree.
allowed people
I
to
agree.
debate. His ego was too big for him to understand that he was declining before us, physically, mentally, morally, and yet, pardoning your own family a day before you leave the White House, and shielding yourself, and basically, doing nothing to save people's lives and children's lives. He was famous for being the guy with empathy, with more empathy than anybody else, that everybody liked in the Senate. Yet he's the guy that in 1982 told the Prime Minister of Israel, Begin, we need more killing after Sabra Shatila. It was not enough to kill 3,000 people. He needed more and more. A
He does
psychopath.
have a weird blind. I mean, it's a very strange blind spot. I can't get into his head. And you've mentioned it, I've mentioned it, that that trademark empathy is just even now completely missing for Palestinians. And unfortunately, this also exists within some parts of the Democratic Party.
A
But
lot of part, let's be clear, a lot of part in the Democratic Party is the people who censored Rashida Tlaib.
yeah,
And then we have now a guy who was elected in Florida, and I don't want to body shame anybody, but the guy that is tweeting starve away to Palestinian children. Either you give the hostages or starve away. The person that endorsed genocide at every turn, and that person is not only not censored, other representative and senator who said that we need to turn Gaza into a parking lot. These people stayed, and nobody is calling them
oh, you're
out.
talking
Yeah,
Randy Fine, right?
exactly. So again,
Congressman
you're
of Florida, 6th Congressional District. His words, proud Zionist, Jewish and proud, speaks for myself. And what you're mentioning is that he openly said, starve away, and he tweeted that to Rashida Tlaib, and Republicans are like, no big deal, and especially with
no.
social media. But Rashida Tlaib is the one who keeps getting grilled.
And this is tells you everything. And again, about how Palestinians were dehumanized utterly and completely and utterly. And I see it on my own, on myself, every time I go to a television network. And the last time I appeared there, and I will never forget, they let me sit. They had a panel of 5 people. They let me sit in a room for an hour and a half, was an hour and a half, like, and then they allowed me to go on the set for 3 minutes, literally 3 or 4 minutes, and then I had 2 people shouting in my ear, two, not one. So basically, one saying that I am pro Hamas, and the other one shouting at me. And when I complained with the producers, basically said, "Oh, we will not have these people with you." I said, "But you understand what? It's not that about these people. It's about who you are. What you're trying to achieve here. You're trying to put me in a position for 3 minutes, basically zero, not only respect, like human understanding that I speak as an expert there. I'm not a leader I'm not a Palestinian leader. I speak as an expert, as somebody who understands the facts and the dynamic and the history of that place. So, and my positions were always very rooted in facts. And yet they are terrified of something that they are willing to bring a Palestinian, just to say they brought one person for 2 minutes, and yet have these 2 or 3 people assault her immediately just because she's stating basic facts. And the basic facts were actually quoting the New York Times and Haaretz, the day that Trump talked about the Mar-a-Lago and, about the Riviera in Gaza. Again, I think we are watching the dismantling of democracy. I remember this quote from the head of CBS who said, yeah, Trump is bad for CBS, but it's good for CBS. It's bad for
Trump is terrible
democracy.
for America, but it's great for CBS.
Exactly.
Les
You know
Moonves.
what? Actually, they know that Israel is they know that Israel now and Trump are very bad for America's democracy, but it doesn't matter. It's not even about rating, not anymore about rating. They truly don't see us as human being. I truly, in that episode, on that set, it was after a year and a half that we are watching live stream genocide. I felt I was not viewed as was not seen as a human being. I was just simply a subhuman minority that was invited for 2 minutes, and not because the producer wanted me. I believe that Abby Phillips wanted me there, and that's why they allowed her to have me for 2 or 3 minutes. And I couldn't take it that time. I thought it's beneath a human dignity. This is beneath any dignity. And since then, I was never invited back. It tells you everything you want to know about how we Palestinians are treated in the United States, even by our own colleagues, by other fellow journalists. As Palestinian journalists, 216 were murdered in cold blood in Gaza to provide and show the world what's happening. And yet we continue to be viewed as subhuman and
Uh,
treated as subhuman.
no, no, it's a problem that should be disappeared and dehumanized and erased, and not just Palestinians, but allies of Palestinians. Remezo Öztürk is a Turkish grad student who co-wrote an op-ed, and folks, she's right now detained. Melissa Barrera is a Mexican-American actress who was the face of the lucrative
Yes,
Scream
yes,
franchise,
yes,
and all she
yes.
did was share an article by a Jewish Israeli Jew.
Miss Rachel,
Yeah,
Miss
that
Rachel.
yeah, Rachel Zegler also, right? Rachel Zegler, literally one of the most powerful producers. Mark Platt flies thousands of miles and tells her to remove her tweet on Palestine, and then the type of hit pieces that have come out against her for the past 2 years. So, folks,
I mean, the producer of 60 Minutes, the historical producer
oh
of
yeah,
60 Minutes, had to resign because they couldn't tolerate that piece telling the truth about Palestine and about Gaza.
that
They
was one of the
couldn't,
one of the main reasons cited, that of editorial interference on Israel and Palestine, and his resignation was to try to wake up the fellow news community to not bend the knee. But here we are. I have a final question for you, Rula. I
yes,
kept you longer than before, but you were on a roll, and I think it's important, especially as we're witnessing and we're about to witness, unfortunately, just full-scale genocide where
yes.
folks, again,
The
don't take my
final,
word for it.
the final stage, the final
Literally
solution.
listen to Smotrich and Netanyahu, folks. We're quoting them directly. In addition to what we've witnessed over the past year and a half, going back full circle with everything we've laid out with the context, clearly in the long run, and I would even say in the short run, supporting Israel politically is not a smart move, whether it's on the left or increasingly on the right. Clearly, it isn't good for security. It isn't good for civil liberties. I agree with you. It is not good for Jewish safety. I've been warning for
No.
10 years. It's not good for Israeli safety. Absolutely genocidal and terrible for Palestinians, for Muslims, Arabs, anyone who looks Palestinian or is an ally of Palestinian. There's still something that the world community can do. They can step up. In this moment, is there anything you think that the international community can do to stop Israel from its own professed goals of ethnically cleansing Palestinians from Gaza?
I don't think Trump will do anything. I think Europe has a chance to do arms embargo immediately, basically exiting the trade deal they have with Israel immediately. You need to use every leverage, diplomatical, political, legal, to force Israel to stop the genocide. If you create enough pressure, I believe they can stop. The United States will not bankroll them forever. We're
Mm.
entering a recession. And in this moment, the first thing that will be cut, first, Social Security and others, but people will look in the Americans like, why am I bankrolling a country that is, have free healthcare, free education, but want to annex more lands? They can survive on their own. And sooner or later, we will reach a stage where America will be forced to cut that military aid or
I think it's
something.
already happening, even within the right wing.
And,
That's what a lot of folks are saying, like Joe Rogan and others, who I completely disagree with. But on
and
this,
they're
they're like,
right.
yeah,
I
they're
agree
like,
with them.
why? Yeah, why am I supporting this?
I agree with them 1000%. Kudos to them. I wish those ideas came from the so-called left and the comedians from the left that actually cheering up for genocide. I find the most disgusting thing that I ever seen in my life. The comedians who claim to be atheists, but they support genocide and the Jewish supremacy in Israel.
I
So
think you're
I'm
talking
not
about
even
Amy Schumer.
what not only men and women alike,
Yeah.
whatever. And for me, it's the fact that the right is leading on that. It just they actually, the left is too shy. The left, so-called left, was too shy even to say these things. But the first thing we need to pressure, wherever you are in the world, pressure your government immediately and condition your vote to actually complying with the laws. And the International Court of Justice gave the international community orders that they need to comply with. Actually, the ICJ gave orders to Israel, but give orders to the world what to do, allowing allowing Netanyahu to fly over airspace in Europe, or European leaders saying we really will allow him to visit. It's shooting themselves in the hip, in the mouth, actually, and allowing Trumpism to become a national phenomenon also in Europe. If you don't want, the AfD in Germany to thrive, if you don't want Viktor Orban to thrive, you cannot back Trump on Israel. You need to distance yourself, but distancing yourself from the Israeli butchery and atrocity and genocide. And the only way you can do it is economically and through the law. So use these leverage. You have enough political and diplomatic arsenal. Activate all of that. And if you are any person around the world, don't buy Israeli products. Boycott Israel in every turn, everywhere, because that's the language they will understand. Last week, there was an Israeli family visiting Naples. They entered a restaurant and they start talking about how great Israel is. The woman served them the food. And then when they start talking about how Israel and people need to go to Israel, she said, excuse me, you're carrying a genocide and you're an apartheid state. I don't want to hear this in my restaurant. They start screaming at her, start filming her, saying you're an anti-Semite. And she said, please leave. Don't even pay what you ate. Please leave. Guess what? They posted the video saying that she's anti-Semite. She started getting death threat, that woman. So again, I think we will see more and more of that because people are much more principled than our government and our establishment. And I think we need to be clear about the ADL is not anymore about combating anti-Semitism. It's basically a propaganda machine for the far-right government in Israel that goes to Israel. The head of the ADL went to Israel and said, we need more terrorist attacks. He didn't use that word, but like that, the Beirut attack in Lebanon, that is actually a terrorist attack. We need more genius attacks like this. And he said, we need them to combat activism on campuses. So he wanted basically to import terrorism to combat, activism on campus. That's a guy that appears on television and he gets celebrated on television every day as, oh, the guy that combat anti-Semitism, and is cheering Trump as he destroy higher education. We need to be clear about who these people are and distance ourselves from that. And I think what you're doing, continue inviting Palestinian voices, Palestinian guests, and continue to talk about the people who are still living in Gaza, but also the people who are dead.
I thank you, Rula. You're the one writing the book. You're the one out on the front lines during a very, very difficult time where, one can only imagine, especially if you are Palestinian, you're seeing what's happening to your communities, both in Palestine and abroad, and those who are on the forefront of helping Palestinians. Folks, many Jews, they said not in our name. A lot of those folks who were protesting against the war for a ceasefire, for the release of
Yes.
hostages side by side with Palestinians on college campuses, I want to remind you, they were Jewish Americans saying
Yes.
God in our name, right? So it's something that affects everyone, not just
Yes.
if you're Palestinian, Jewish, Arab, or Muslim. You are seeing the long arm of fascism abduct and kidnap students, thought policing folks, right? Going after celebrities, going after universities. You're seeing fascists unite. What's happening with India and against Kashmir? They're uniting with Netanyahu. They're uniting with Trump. So this is about democracy and human rights and decency. And at the very least, one hopes that in the future, if we are alive, inshallah, we can say we did something. We at least stood up. We said no to genocide, right? And maybe, just not that we said no to genocide. In some way or form, we helped stop it. That is the
Yes.
end goal, right? Peace and security for everyone. Rula, the book is Genocidia, which is genocide. It is released in Italy today. It will be released in the United States in 3 months. Please shamelessly promote yourself. How can people find you, read you, support you?
On Twitter, on X, at Rula Jebreal, and also both Facebook and Instagram. But please continue following Zeteo. It's where the platform and the home for all of us who are exiled in exodus from mainstream media, who can find our ideals, our ideas, and especially our fact-based reporting, accurate analysis in an honest way at Zeteo. So please follow us on this amazing platform.
Rula and I are both contributors to Zeteo. Please subscribe to Zeteo if you can. And this has been The Left Hook. Like a fool, I have no paywalls. Pay what you can. If you can't, the content is free. Please share it. Pay when you can, inshallah. But it's important for people to stay informed. And I believe
Yes.
people should be informed, especially during the rise of fascism. You have to be armed with facts and knowledge, and hopefully empathy as well. Until next time, folks, take care of yourselves, be kind to each other, and please, oh, please, don't be a genocidal fascist. Take care.
Thank you, Aj.